I work in the Particle Science and Engineering group at GSK, which sits within our product development division in GlaxoSmithKline R&D. I'll go into some details about our approach and how we created a kinetics model which we think is just complex enough to be mechanistically descriptive, but still simple enough that we can effectively communicate it and use it for improving our process understanding. The system, I've got sort of my own version of what you might typically generate in DynoChem, which is a description of the system, and you've got a couple different things at play. So you've got dissolution of the starting material, A solids, you've got the equilibration of the ammonia vapor from the ammonium hydroxide in solution, you've got, and then the reactions in solution. Some of the assumptions that we made, and I alluded to these earlier, and essentially our intent here was to start simple with the sequential reactions in solution, right? And so what we did first was we assumed that all of the A was in solution, which based on previous observations was reasonably true. The heat up profiles we assumed were linear and comparable across the lab runs. That was not too much of a stretch. We were running in the same lab reactors throughout the runs. And then ammonia dissolution, we essentially assumed that the ammonia was available for the reaction and that the mass transfer there was not going to be an issue. That same sample data set with the blue box overlaid on the plot, which is meant to indicate that same reaction window. So at some point, the reaction will come to completion and the A is consumed, and at some point, we will get to a point of failure where we have excess C. And the difference here on this plot is that I've got our DynoChem model predictions overlaid with the data points as well. And so what we aimed to do here was to create a set of reaction equations reaction kinetics equations, which would describe the reaction. And so I've got the screenshot from the DynoChem model to the left. As you can see, we kept it fairly simple. It was essentially a series of sequential reactions in solution. And so A plus the ammonia will go to B, and then B plus ammonia will go to C. Although we didn't take every single experiment to a point of failure, we observed that for a low-level impurity, such as compound C, that the kinetics were close enough to linear that we could approximate an endpoint for those data sets where we did not have full failure data. And so what that enabled us to do is give each experimental condition or experiment a time to completion and a time to failure. And so actual endpoint of the reaction, which would be the point on the left, and the actual point or the linear extrapolated point at which the C would be in excess and give it a failure point. So those are our experimental column. For the model columns, what we would essentially do is take each set of conditions and put them in DynoChem and create a simulated time at which the reaction would be complete and at which it would fail. And so we converted our previous metrics, which were all in terms of our raw HPLC data, into these new metrics of time completion and time to failure. So then we had new outputs for both our internal and our external data set, because now we're verifying using the new metrics of time to completion and time to failure. And so I've got, for continuity's sake, on the bottom left and bottom right, a predicted versus actual plot for now, time to completion and time to failure. And then in the top right, I've got our series of statistical calculations that we perform to assess fit. The set of primary and competing reactions that I have, so A plus ammonia goes to B, B plus ammonia goes to C, were used directly as a medium impact model, which essentially means that we're still end product testing with this stage. However, we're able to establish the design space, and this was the model at its core, are these two reaction kinetics equations. So yes, we were able to describe the reaction kinetics. The second one is to simplify the manufacturing process. And so since we were operating in a space where we felt very comfortable based on both the model and based on our experimental data and verification on plant scale, we no longer required reaction sampling at the end of the reaction. In addition to that, we have a predictive capability via any future DynoChem simulation. So I've essentially taken the model and keeping it in case any of the reaction conditions may change in the future, and we're able to run within the space that we've experimented any new simulations, which should give us a very close approximation of when both the reactions should finish and when we would come to a failure point.